Runnah, running Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and beyond. And I'm Julianna, your host for this brand new running podcast. I'm super excited to be here because I am here today to highlight what I think is one of the most underrated communities for running on the East Coast in Massachusetts. If not, maybe the globe. I don't know. That's to be contested. We'll put that out to the jury and the universe to be contested. But welcome, everyone. So what we're going to be doing in this episode, which is our pilot/first episode, is we're going to give you a overview of what this podcast is going to be, so you can have a little bit of an expectation of that. And then we are also going to get into who the heck is this person sitting in front of me and why do I care that they know anything about running? So yes, hello, that is me, Juliana. We'll get into that in just a few moments. So Runnah. What is Runnah? Well, essentially, it is the Massachusetts spelling of runner, because this is how we pronounce things in Massachusetts. We drop the R, and thus you get Runnah. So that is how we're going to pronounce it. And yes, that is spelled correctly up there on the screen. So this is going to be a highlight of running specifically in Falmouth, Massachusetts. That's going to be our base point, which is also the home to the Falmouth Road Race, which I'm sure many of you listening have either heard of or run or any of the combination of the two. And we're also going to be talking about other running things happening here on Cape Cod, like the Cape Cod Marathon, as you can see on my shirt, and all the other really awesome races that happen in the area, and maybe even going out towards the Boston Marathon, other marathons and other races and other running communities that live in the Massachusetts and New England area, just because there's so much that happens here, and I'm just so excited to share with you guys the running community that is Falmouth, because I just feel like it's, again, one of the most underrated running communities around. I think people don't realize how interconnected it is with the Boston running community, the global running community, how our town goes from I don't know, I'm just guesstimating numbers, but approximately 40,000 people to over 100,000 people for the time span of 2 to 3 days for the Falmouth Road Race. It's wild. The streets of Woods Hole are not meant to hold that many people. We had slightly over 11,000 runners for the Falmouth Road Race this year, and it was packed. Very, very tight. We are sardines there. So I feel like people don't understand what the connections are between Falmouth and running, and how just ingrained running is into the Falmouth community here, and how many cool people there are here doing so many cool things running. And I just want to share this community with you all. I want to share all the fun things that happen here. I want to share some tips and tricks for running some of the races down here, like the Falmouth Road Race, like the Cape Cod Marathon, things that haven't really been put on a podcast before. I'm a very avid podcast listener, and I've been podcasting and been listening to podcasts for I think probably 7 to 10 years now, give or take, in that time frame. So I've listened to many a running podcast. I've also gone through many a running podcast binge and gone through many searches to try and find Falmouth Road Race and Cape Cod Marathon content, and it just doesn't exist out there. So here I am to bring you that content that I have wanted for so long. So here we are. Welcome. That is what you can expect. We're going to be bringing in guests that are both local and not local. I have some wonderful friends who we're going to bring on the pod. I have some wonderful race organizers we're going to bring on the pod. And I think you guys are really going to enjoy this. And I feel like you're going to be saying, wow, a bunch of times, because you're not going to realize just how deeply ingrained running is into the Falmouth community here. And I'm so excited to bring that all to you. Yay! So, next matter of business. Who is this? Who is this person sitting in front of me on this chair with a loud voice? What is she doing here? Why is she wearing this blue shirt? Why do I even care what she has to say? Well, let me tell you. My name is Julianna, last name Coughlin, Julianna Coughlin. That would be my full name. I am not a local, I'm not a resident of Falmouth originally. I'm actually from Auburn, Massachusetts, which if you put your finger directly in the center of the map of Massachusetts, that's where I grew up. And I moved down here about 7 to 8 years ago, give or take. And once you get the beach, you ain't going back. So I absolutely love it here. I love the community here. I love the running community here. I love the beaches. I love how pretty it is. I just really enjoy being a resident of Falmouth, as you might have told by my enthusiasm level. And I also am a runner. So I'd like to give you guys a little bit of my like running origin story so you can kind of understand where I'm coming from as a runner and maybe take that into the podcast, because that's probably going to be relevant to some of the conversations I'm going to be having with people. And also just to give you a glimpse into how different people come into running, because we're going to be seeing across this podcast probably a ton of different entry points into running. And mine is just one of them. And it's definitely not like the only way you can get into running. I mean, it definitely is not. That much I know is true. And it's not the best way in any capacity. And I just want to give you guys also, if you're starting out with running, just let you know that everyone gets into it at a different time in life and a different point in life. And there are so many ways into running. And I just want to encourage you, if you're just starting out, if you're thinking about starting out, if you're anywhere in your running journey, you can do it. I believe in you. You got this. Big hearts. Love you very much. And just give you that empowerment to just start running. Just do it. So I'm sure we'll get into some fun little Julianna-isms, as I call them, some weird little phrases that I say. I'm not sure if I can swear here, so we'll get into that later. I have a few like little mantras, shall we say, that may or may not be as appropriate as they can be. They have swears in them, but they're not like fully inappropriate. But we'll get into them later if I figure out if I can swear here or not. But I am just going to give you guys a introduction into how the heck I even started running and where I am in my running career right now. And I say that like I actually have a career in running. I don't, really, no one's paying me to actually run, but I run things. So essentially where we're going to start is like grade school, middle school, like high school. I didn't do track. I didn't do cross country. I was that kid in middle school who was puffing and huffing to try and get that one lap in before gym class. At that point, I was also pretty overweight. When I was in my sophomore year of high school, I took the action to actually start being physically active, actually eating a little bit healthier instead of binge eating full pounds of cheese and full boxes of cookies. But I took some action. I ended up losing about 75 pounds, and I actually didn't start running then either. My primary form of physical activity during that time was I had this little tiny trampoline that was yay big that my parents had bought that we kept in the house, and I would bounce up and down on this trampoline just for an hour or two a day in front of the TV, and that was my physical activity. So that's kind of where I started off in high school with not running. And then when I got to my senior year of high school, my best friend at the time, Lydia, was like, "Hey, Julianna." And I was like, "What? Do you think it would be crazy if we ran a mile together every day after school?" And I said, "Lydia, that would be mentally insane." So what did we do? We ran a mile together every day after school, which at my high school was 4 laps of the outside track or 16 laps of the gym. So a lot of the times we did 16 laps of the gym, and wow, did I feel like a bad, I guess you can bleep me out, Kurt, a badass. I felt like I was just killing it. I was on these streets. Don't mess with me. Here I am. I ran a mile. Thank you so much for asking. I did that after high school. Yes, I did. I have no idea what our pace was. Not a clue in the world. It was probably 20 minutes a mile. It was we were not speed demons in any capacity. So we did that, and my mom saw what we were doing, and she was like, "Hey, would you like to do the Couch to 5K program? I'm trying to get back in shape. I think this would be fun for us to do as a family. Would you like to do that?" And I said, "Yes, I would like to do that." And so I broke out the best running shoes out there, this $9 pair of Payless running shoes, and I said, "Let me take on this Couch to 5K program. Thank you so much for asking." And so we did that, and wow, I was feeling, again, like a badass, just feeling it out, and we completed that program, and after we completed that program, and I was just feeling wow, I don't think I could ever run more than 3 miles in my life, because 5K is 3.1 miles, and my Aunt Tina was telling us that there's this road race that she runs every year, and they have a summer house down on the Cape. And she's told us, "Hey, the Falmouth road race, you should put your name in and you could run it. It's a lot of fun." And my mom asked us all, and we said, "Yeah, let's try and do it." And so I went from feeling 3 miles was the longest I could ever run. That was the equivalent of me climbing Mount Everest. I could never go any further. We were at the tippity top of our career. I had peaked. That was it. To then having to train for a 7-mile road race. So I, being myself, was kind of methodical about it in a way. And I actually ended up going to the gym every day. I did all of my training inside, which I would not recommend as a veteran of the Falmouth Road Race now. Don't do that. It's real hot. So we'll get to that later. But I did all my training inside on the treadmill, but each day I would come back and I started out at the 3 miles. So the first day I ran 3, and the second day I ran 3.25. The third day I ran 3.5. And each day I was just like incrementally adding like a quarter of a mile onto how far I was running. And by the middle of the summer, I had gotten up to 7 miles, and I was consistently running 7 miles on the treadmill inside. And I was just like so proud of myself. But let me tell you, my little high school slash like beginning of college brain was not ready for the excitement and the je ne sais quoi that is the Falmouth Road Race, and just how many people there were going to be and how nervous I was going to be, having to like get up at 5 a.m., drive all the way to the Cape, stand in a corral squished full of people, have no idea. This was my first road race I had ever run. And I was so nervous. I was like nervous out of my brain, just like ready to pee myself at any given point in time. And luckily I didn't. But I ran that race, and unbeknownst to me, because I was just like trying to get to the end the entire time, I actually finished first out of my entire family. Granted, I finished in like an hour and 10 minutes. Like, it was no kind of like speed demon work. Like, it's not a bad time in any capacity, but just for my reference point, like, I've run faster, and like that's a pretty, I would say, like fastly average time. You're not going to win any awards with that time. But I finished, and I was like, where is everyone else? Granted, at that point, the ballpark was full of people, but I couldn't find my family, and then they all came in after me. I was like, wow, look at me doing this thing. And so then I went away to college. I just ran about like 7 miles a day just to stay in shape, and graduated college, ended up moving out to Richmond, Virginia. When I was down there in Richmond, Virginia, my coworkers were telling me about some of the races that were happening down there, because Richmond, Virginia has a really great running community. I honestly can't wait to go back and run the full marathon down there. We'll get to the half marathon in a second. And there's this one race in Richmond, Virginia called the Monument Ave 10K. And I kid you not, like literally every single person in the entire city of Richmond, Virginia comes out and runs this 10K. And so I said, well, as someone who runs, like I kind of got to do this. And so I did that. And that was the first race I had ran since I ran the Falmouth Road Race, my second ever road race ever. And I loved it. I had a great time. And I ended up going on to run some of the other races in Richmond, Virginia, some of the 10Ks, some of the 5Ks. And the half marathon / marathon was rolling around, which happens in November. And people were talking about it. And I was talking to my coworker, Karen, which for reference is this woman who at the time was in like her 70s. She was a little bit on the bigger side. Like, she's someone who you would look at and like not automatically think runs half marathons. And I was talking to her because I was thinking about running the half marathon, but I wasn't really sure. And let me just tell you, this woman, Karen, she lives rent-free in my brain. We love Karen. Like, when I'm having a low moment in time, I always think to myself, and this is the thing that I still do, if Karen can do it, you can do it. And she told me that she runs the half marathon every single year. And I said, really? And she said, yeah. I said, really? And she said, yeah. I said, And she's like, show me pictures. And I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. And in my head, I was like, I'm not going to let this old lady run the half marathon, and I can't run the half marathon. Who do I think I am? I'm like 21 years old. I can do this. And so I signed up for the half marathon, and the whole time I was just thinking to myself, wow, if Karen can do it, then I can do it. And wow, did my calves cramp up at mile 11. I trained for this. Again, not the best methods. I trained on the treadmill the whole time because I was just kind of scared to get lost in Richmond, Virginia. I was living there by myself, as you do if you move somewhere by yourself with no connections to anyone. This is kind of what happens, And I finished, and I was so proud of myself. I think I'm the first person, at least in my immediate family, I know I'm the first person to have run a half marathon distance or further. And so I was just like beyond proud of myself, completely blasted, like so tired. And just like, I was like, wow, look at me out here on these streets, absolutely killing it. I had a great time, but I did finish, and I was like, ooh, I saw the marathon runners running next to us. Could I do that too? And so that kind of went on the back burner. I ended up moving up to Falmouth, Massachusetts. Hello. And ended up trying to make friends and do things up here. And I was like, you know what? Let me get into the running community up here. And so the first race I ran when I moved up here was the Seagull 6. And if any of you are Falmouth locals, or if you've run the Seagull 6 before, you'll be like, oh, Julianna, why did you do that? I didn't know. I had no idea that it is the most competitive course in all of the Falmouth courses, besides like the professionally run Falmouth Road Race. Because if you are a person looking to hit a good time or get some good solid tempo training for the Boston Marathon, wow, the times run at this locally run race that has like 50 people to like 150 people at it, wild, absolutely wild. And there's always a bet going around as to how crappy the weather is going to be for this thing. One year I've run this thing and I got rained on, hailed on, and snowed on, and then the sun came out within a 6-mile loop of Woods Hole. That's not okay. That loop's not that big. There shouldn't be that much weather. But yeah, thus there is. So I ran that race. I got my butt handed to me hardcore. And I said, oh no, we can't be doing this. And then proceeded to go and run all the other local races anyway. And found out that there was a half marathon, Cape Cod Half Marathon, which is part of the Cape Cod Marathon weekend. And I ran that. And during that time, so that's on the Saturday. So the way that's set up, the half marathon is on Saturday, the full marathon is on Sunday. The full marathon also has a relay that you can be a part of. So your team collectively does 26.2 miles, which is the length of a marathon. And I, being a Falmouth Running Club member, you're allowed to be on a relay team for free. And I said, you know what? I ran the half marathon on Saturday. I probably would go up for a shakeout run on Sunday anyway. Let me be part of a relay team. So I finished the half marathon. I was like really happy with it. I did a great job. Like that training was definitely hard on my body because I hadn't run a half marathon in a while. And so I ran the relay team. And during that, you run alongside the people who are running the full marathon. And I was just so inspired by everyone who was running this full marathon. And I was like, wow, I need to do that. And so what did I do the next year? I signed up for my first marathon, which is the shirt that I'm wearing. This is the Cape Cod Marathon from 2018. This is the first full marathon I ran. And I will just put it like lightly and say that I had a rough time training like for my first marathon. And I think it's pretty typical for anyone who does run their first marathon and is not like an elite runner who is gifted running prowess as a youngin'. I sent multiple messages over to my friends who were veteran marathon runners, like of me crying, being like, how do you do this? I'm so tired and I don't know how I'm going to finish it. Just being very, very distressed over my training and how tired I was and just not knowing how I was going to get to the end of this. But all the time also just being like, I will finish this. And this is where we saw the debut of a Julianna classic, which is the Run to the Death, which I don't really partake in much anymore. And that is when I run a full marathon distance, the 26.2 miles on my own, with my own like fuel and fluids and stuff like that, but essentially without any course support or cheerleaders or anything like that. And wow, was that hard. That was challenging, but I did it. I ran a full 26.2 miles before I ran my full marathon, and wow, did I bonk in those last 3 miles of that Run to the Death. And I mentally knew I could do it. I showed up race day morning. I was so freaking nervous. I, again, was ready to pee my pants at any given moment. And I knew that the first 3 miles I was going to have with my friend Sarah because she was running the first leg of the relay for her relay team. So I was like, okay, at least I have someone I can run the first 3 miles with. And that was all going good. I got to like mile like 2.5. And all of a sudden, behind me, I hear this voice. Julianna Coughlin. I said, who is this voice? I do not know this voice. And I turn around, it is my now buddy, Mike Falcone. And they said, hi, I'm Mike. I'm from the Falmouth Running Club. I see you at all the races. And Mike and I both discovered in that moment that neither one of us know how to shut up. And so we proceeded to run most of the entire race together, just chatting the entire time. And we had a great time. And thus started the tradition of Julianna and Mike running the Cape Cod Marathon together. And what a lovely tradition it is. And shout out to you, Mike. Big hugs. And Mike is running the Cape Cod Marathon again this year. I will be announcing the finish line. We'll get to that in a minute. But I ran most of this marathon with Mike. It mostly went okay, except for the fact that your girl Julianna here, and we'll probably dive into this more at some point, she has irritable bowel disease. And so, around mile 22, I said, Mike, I must make a stop And so from that point to like mile 25-ish, I was playing porta potty hopscotch and just really just like letting it rip from porta potty to porta potty because my GI tract was like not having it. And I was like, I don't think I'm gonna finish this thing. Oh my God. And I finally, things kind of settled around mile 25. And on the old Cape Cod Marathon course, that used to be, and it still kind of is, I believe. Yeah, it is, on Surf Drive. And we had a clock out there that was 1 mile out from the finish line. And so when you pass that clock, you know, okay, I'm 1 mile from the finish line and this is the time on the clock right now. And so when I passed that clock, and I had no time goals for this, my only goal was just to finish. I saw that there was 3 hours and like 30-ish minutes on the clock. And I was like beside myself. I was like, if I can walk this thing in and come in under 4 hours. Like I was so excited, so ecstatic. And I finished the marathon. I like smiling, just so excited, coming through the finish line, like the happiest I had like ever been in my life up to that point. Just so proud of myself. And just like, this is where Julianna learned another one of her life lessons, which we'll get into at some point too. But that the only person you really have to impress in life is yourself. And this is one of the nice things about running is you learn things about yourself. And like throughout this marathon training block, I learned a lot of things about myself. One of the things that I credit this marathon training block to, my first ever marathon training block, was it taught me patience. And this is where you guys get to see my tattoo that says, you can only run the mile you're in. So if you're listening audibly, I have a tattoo on my arm that says you can only run the mile you're in. It's in my mom's handwriting. And that pretty much just means that you can only be in this moment. Whether you like it or not, this is the only moment you can be in, and you might as well just experience it and just breathe. Because you can't be in any other moment. You can't be in the one ahead of it. You can't be in the one in front of it. You can only be here. And I learned that during my marathon training block the first time, and I credit that first marathon to teaching me patience, and here we are. But sometimes, you know, my arm is smarter than my brain. It's not always it's a practicable skill. You got to practice that patience, you know? But the other thing that I learned when I was running my first marathon and when I finished was that the only person you really have to impress is yourself. And I crossed the finish line, and I will say this is just full like Delulu Julianna moment here. That I crossed the finish line and I was expecting my family to be there with like signs and like be like, wow, woo, yeah. And some people's families are like that. That's fine. It's good. I was expecting that out of my family. From a family that is just not like that. My family is just not like that, and I should just know that, and I did not. And I was expecting them to really like step outside the box in a way that was not them in that moment. And I crossed the finish line, and they were like, yeah, good job. Guess what we did? We ate pancakes. I was like, okay, aren't you proud of me? They're like, yeah, but we had pancakes. I was like, but I just ran a marathon. Did you see that? That's the biggest thing I've ever done in my life, you know? It's a nice time. And they're like, yeah, but we had big pancakes. I was like, okay. So the only person you have to impress is yourself. And if that is eating big pancakes, that's fine. If it's running a marathon, that's also fine, you know? So we learned a lot of things. So from that, I kind of came away from it with a lot of life lessons. And I also finished that thinking to myself, I could run that faster. So you'll find with marathon running and any kind of distance running, you'll have two types of people. The person who finishes the race and says, never again in my life will I ever do that. That is the end. Thank you so much. That was a nice time. I will never do that again. And then you have the person who says, I could do that better. And I was in the second camp of, I could do that better. And thus begins my kind of tenure into marathon running. So my next marathon I ran was the Boston Marathon. And then after that, I went to run the Chowder Challenge, which is the half marathon and the full marathon back-to-back days for the Cape Cod Marathon. So you run the 13.1 miles on the Saturday and the 26.2 miles on the Sunday. And ooh, baby, if I thought regular marathon running kicked my butt and marathon training kicked my butt, was I in for a reality check? That pretty much means like your whole weekend is shot because you got to do a long run on whatever first day you have off. So I would do Saturday, and then I would get my butt back up and run another like 15 to 20. So I run like probably about like 15 to 23 miles on Saturday, and then another like 13 to 17 miles on Sunday. And yeah, that was tiring. And that pretty much like by the end of Sunday, I was done. Like that was the end. That was it. That was all she wrote. So I did that, and luckily for me, my buddy Mike was running the Cape Cod Marathon again when I did that. And so Mike and I ran that together, and we had a lovely time. And that's my greatest running accomplishment to date, I would say. And I love it. I had an amazing time running both of those races. I got to run the half marathon with my friend Bethany. I got to run the full marathon with my friend Mike. We had a fabulous day on the half marathon. We had an absolute crap day on the full marathon. We got hailed on in the eyeballs coming back down Surf Drive. Do not recommend. But we did it, and I was crying as I was coming down Surf Drive, mostly because there was hail in my eyeballs, and also because I had put so much time and effort, and I had been living in the moment the entire time when I had been training for the most part for this set of races, and I was sad that the training and the experiencing of everything was over. So what did I do? I signed up for another marathon, which then went to get canceled because that was 2020. But since then, I've run Boston again. I've run Chicago. I just ran the Tokyo Marathon. I'm going to be running the Clarence DeMar Marathon coming up. That is what I will be doing in the next couple of weeks. But I have pretty much gotten myself into a groove where I run 2 marathons a year. And that being said, I'm not an elite runner. I'm not running for time. I just like to run in a manner where I can talk to people the whole time. Even when I went to Tokyo, I found Americans or English speakers that I could talk to. And I found this lovely older gentleman who runs all the world marathon majors, which for reference are London, Berlin, Tokyo, Chicago, New York, and Boston. He runs them. He's like 75 years old. He lives in Maine, and he runs them all in yellow Crocs. And I said, "You do you, sir. You do you." And we ran the first 7 miles of the Tokyo Marathon together. And if you know Massachusetts, and I tell you that this person was from Maine, and he told me that after the fact, and I said, "Mm-hmm." You get where I'm coming from. So if he was from Maine, an interesting person. And yeah, we had a nice time. But I like to just go out and run races where I can just have a nice time. I like to yell at people while I'm running in a positive manner. Like scream at people that they can cheer louder for me, that I need more screaming at me. Please scream at me. And I just like to go out and have a nice time. I'm not out here to press any time goals. I'm not out here to do any of that. I'm just here to have a nice, fun time and experience running that distance. Because I feel like the marathon for me is a distance that personally challenges me and my body. I have a lot of like medical conditions. Like I said, I have irritable bowel disease. I also have this condition called ankylosing spondylitis, which I like to call my fancy arthritis, where eventually my spine fuses together at the bottom. I turn into Quasimodo, and I will be looking for a church to haunt at some point. So if you know, you hit me up. I need a cathedral. And so I have a lot of things that I deal with both on a personal level. So for me, that's a good distance where I feel like I'm being challenged every time I step up to the plate. I get a good ass kicking from it in a positive manner. And I also really like the people who run marathons. I feel like that's where I found my tribe of runners. I'm not like a speedy 5K runner. I'm not really into like the slightly even more casualness of the half marathon quite as much as I am the full marathon. I feel like for me, like that's my people. And that being said, and all of those things about like who I am as a runner, what I'm doing, things like that, now that you guys have a bit of a backstory on me, I would say one of the most important things about running is kind of trying a bunch of things and figuring out where you fit in. Because where I fit in doesn't mean that's where you're going to fit in. And that's where this podcast is going to come back into play. So what this podcast is going to highlight is a bunch of different aspects of running. We'll have people who run like 50 plus mile ultra marathons coming in. We're going to have people who specify in possibly like the 100 to 200 meter distance, things all the way in the gamut, all the age ranges, people who go behind the scenes. I'm going to be bringing in some of my friends who are behind the scenes at the Cape Cod Marathon, hopefully behind the scenes at the Falmouth Road Race too. And you'll get to see everyone from maybe the person who coordinates the porta potties to the person who directs the start line to people like myself who announce the finish line of races. So you'll get to see all the different gamuts, because I feel like people also don't realize how involved and multifaceted running is and how many different formats you can participate in as a runner, as a volunteer, as a race organizer, as a spectator. There's just so many different elements to running that really make it approachable, I feel like, for everyone. And I feel like specifically in Falmouth, we embrace all of that in one big giant tent of like welcoming everyone in. You'll find that a lot of the races you'll run around here, sometimes you'll run next to someone, sometimes you'll see them being a course marshal out on the course, sometimes you'll see them announcing the finish line like myself, sometimes you'll see them handing out bananas at the finish line to all the runners who have just finished. You'll see everyone here participating in multiple capacities, and it's just so nice. I love volunteering at races. I love being able to announce races. It's my favorite thing. For me, the Cape Cod Marathon weekend is my favorite weekend because it's where I get to announce the finish line. And for me, that is like Christmas, the 4th of July, Thanksgiving, Halloween, my birthday, Black Friday, like everything rolled up into one, because it is my favorite weekend out of the entire year, because I get to celebrate people and I get to positively yell and scream at them and tell them that they are awesome and they are doing great and that they are amazing. And that's another thing that I want all of you guys to take away from this too, is that I believe in every single one of you. If you have a goal for running, I want you to know, or walking, or something in between, I want you to know that I believe in you and I know that you can do it. Like you guys heard, I'm not a professional runner in any capacity, and I have a lot of like weird things that I have to kind of like mitigate when I'm doing my running, but that doesn't mean I'm going to stop. And that doesn't mean I don't believe that I can do it. And that doesn't mean that I don't believe that you can do it. So if anything, I want you to take away from this is that if Julianna can do it, I can do it. If Karen can do it, I can do it. And I want you to believe in yourselves and know that I believe in you. So Runnah is going to be that Massachusetts podcast that is going to give you guys just a taste and hopefully a big old mouthful of what Massachusetts and Falmouth and Cape Cod running is, and also hopefully inspire you to run a little bit yourself. You don't have to live in Massachusetts or on the Cape or in Falmouth to enjoy what is the spirit of running in these areas, and also taking that into your own running. So I am really excited to bring you guys this podcast and hopefully inspire all of you to get up and do something in the running community, whether it's volunteering, whether it's race announcing, whether it's running. I believe in you. I know you got it, and you can do this. And we'll see you next week on Runnah. Thank you for listening to this episode of Runnah. This podcast is edited, hosted, and produced by me, Julianna Coughlin. Brought to you in part by the Falmouth Running Club and the Falmouth Community TV station. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on Instagram and on TikTok at RunnahPod, and you can send us an email at runnahpod@gmail.com. And our original theme music was brought to you by the one and the only wonderful Jeffrey Hutton. And keep up the great work. I'm proud of you.